Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. I'm Nathan Taylor, your host. I lead the team over here at the Sourcepass Center of Excellence for Microsoft. We're your one-stop shop for all things Microsoft licensing, consulting, projects, and hopefully just a good place for you to keep up with all the craziness that Microsoft's bringing. I've been doing small to medium business IT consulting, especially focused on the Microsoft ecosystem for over 20 years. And so today I'm excited to bring you along for our third episode about Azure cost management. This will be our third and final episode. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, I recommend you go check them out. They're about 30 minutes long. In the first one, we just kind of talked high level about how Azure worked from a billing perspective and kind of dug into some of the details. The second episode, we went into the main ways you can save money on Azure. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. And then we're going to dig especially into the cost management tooling we can bring to bear on this. And so really looking forward to doing that. But before we do that, let's jump into some interesting facts about Azure. So let's throw a couple things at you. One is that Azure didn't always exist. This is a more modern Microsoft product. It's probably about 10 years old. I should Google that while we're chatting. But when it was first built, it was called Microsoft Project Red Dog. Microsoft always uses code words for their projects. So there's a little interesting tidbit for you. And the other tidbit is that the original Azure portal was built in a product called Silverlight. If you remember Silverlight, it was kind of a web programming interface language. I'm butchering that, but it was a framework for building web apps. And Microsoft pushed it really hard in the late 2000s. And so the original portal was built in Silverlight. And so I looked it up. Azure officially became a product in February of 2010. It was renamed to Microsoft Azure in March of 2014, March 25 of 2014. So really 2014 is when it really took off. AWS predated this product by a number of years, but Amazon launched their product much earlier. And Azure was kind of a response to that product set. But the early days of Silverlight, when you were playing with Azure, it was interesting when they started transitioning it to the HTML-based modern interface. Sometimes you had to go do things in Silverlight instead of in the modern portal. So you'd have to go back to the old portal to manage certain things. So I remember days where that's at the same time they were moving Intune between the Silverlight and the modern portal. And you'd have to go to the Intune portal in Silverlight to do certain things. So that's kind of old history, 2014. So it's about 11, 12 years old. I've probably been using it for 10 of those years. Started playing with it about 10 years ago as it was a really new product, and used it actively probably for the last 8 years. And so been a cool product, a lot of fun to dig into. It's a lot of fun to nerd out about. So looking forward to chatting with you today. So let's dig in and talk about the product and what we want to talk about today. So what I want to cover today is just a continuation of our conversation on the various ways we can manage our costs in Azure. And so we're going to start with kind of going high level again. Azure is billed based on consumption. Every hour of usage of each product, Azure bills you for. And so you run that VM for every hour of the month. If it's a long month, a 31-day month, it's going to cost you more than February when it's a 28-day month. And they bill you for each resource that runs for that hour. So each disk, each IP address, each VM. Some resources don't have infrastructure costs, so then maybe they don't charge you for things like network security groups. Those are logical constructs that manage security on the network. Those I don't believe have a billing cost, but the disks and the network interfaces and the IP addresses and the virtual machines that use those do have a cost. The VPN gateway connected to that network security group does have a cost because you're paying for Microsoft to run the infrastructure running that VPN gateway. Those costs can start to add up over time as you add additional VMs, your storage grows, your logs grow, your snapshots grow. All these resources use space and VMs and physical hardware and virtual resources on the Azure infrastructure, and they bill you for those things as they grow. So the 4 primary ways we can go dig into cost savings is to, 1, clean up old resources that are no longer used and resizing resources that are the wrong size. You might be running a VM, and on premise, you ran it as a 4-core, 16 gig of RAM VM, and it ran great. So you put it in Azure as a 4-core, 16 gig of RAM VM. But the reality is you never need more than 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM because it's a pretty simple server. It's running a lightweight utility. That double the size VM over what it needs means you're paying twice as much. So if we can find resources that we can shrink down their size, then we can pay less. And so we'll talk about that a little bit today, some tools for that. The second piece is to then figure out what VMs and resources you're going to have around long term. There's a way to save money by committing to Microsoft to pay for those VMs long term. And so you build out those VMs. You say, yes, Microsoft, I'm going to have 4 of the VMs in this size for the next year. And they'll give you around 30 to 40% off the cost of the virtual machine in Azure for committing for a year. Now you have to pay for it for the year. Once you click commit, you're paying 12 months of that VM. The cost of the VM doesn't change when it's a reservation because the cost is static. And so in that case, there's another advantage is you get predictable costs. The third way we can really reduce pricing on virtual machines especially is to use hybrid use benefit, Azure hybrid use benefits. The idea behind that is you pre-commit to pay for the server license for that server if it's a Windows server in Azure. And that's through a CSP licensing process, just like you would buy a Microsoft Business Premium or an E3 license. You buy a server license, 8-core pack, $25 a month approximately. Pay for that, and then you can go take 20 to 40% of the cost of the VM away as well. So you combine those and you can save 50 to 80% on the cost of your VM by doing that. There's other options to save money in Azure, including savings plans and turning servers off. Maybe you have a server that doesn't need to be on for more than a day a month. You run a job on it once a month. You can turn that off. Or maybe you turn it off in the evenings because nobody's using it after hours. Or maybe you have a server that needs a lot of horsepower for a week of the year to do your end of month calculations, but the rest of the year it can be small. You can script resizing it. There's lots of ways we can reduce the cost of the resource we're using in Azure. And so today we're going to talk a lot about the tooling around that. We've talked a lot about the mechanics, and of course our team can walk you through, just to straight up look at what you're using and tell you how to save money on it. That's something we do all the time. We love having those conversations so we can walk you through how to save money. But I want to talk you through a couple of the other ways that can be approached. So we're going to pull up the portal. The first tool we're going to talk about is Azure Advisor. In your Azure tenant, you should have access to a cost management portal that'll show you cost management details. We looked at that the first week. There are some customers where your partner is not allowing you to see cost management. That's something for you to work through with them. Various reasons that partners do that. We generally want our customers to see that data, so we enable that functionality for our customers. Cost management gives you a lot of visibility and dashboards on what you have. Another portal in there is the Azure Advisor portal. And what it is, it's a set of recommendations, and this is kind of the splash page for this. I just searched for Azure Advisor on Google and found the link to it. This shows you a lot of what's going on in Azure Advisor. It gives you a lot of recommendations across cost, security, reliability, operational excellence, and performance. And this could be really valuable data. It's built off of Microsoft's database of all the VMs they're running and their recommendations and their best practices. And this tool could be really helpful. We'll get to cost in a second, but let's talk about the other things it can show. It can show you security best practices. Great to look at that. Hey, you should enable this security feature. Hey, you have an open port here. Hey, your blob storage has got a public URL that's vulnerable and should not be open to the public, that sort of thing. Reliability tends to be recommendations around ways to run Azure in a more reliable format. One of the powers of Azure is the ability to build highly redundant systems. You want a website that won't go down when a data center goes down, or you want to be able to fail over your system from one region to the other in the case of a natural disaster or a server outage or a network outage or a regional network issue. You're able to do that with those functionalities, and they'll give you recommendations along those paths. Operational excellence tends to cover more best practices in the proper way to run things in Azure. And finally, performance will give you data like, hey, that's because of what I talked about a second ago. They'll give you recommendations on, hey, this VM is 3 times the size it needs to be. You could save 75% of your costs by dropping it down 2 sizes. And so it's really valuable to go look at this. We look at it every time. The pricing one, the cost savings is really valuable. They will show you information on the reservations we've talked about. These are the VMs we recommend that you adjust and put a reservation on, and here's what it will save you. Now, the numbers they put in here are based on a 3-year reservation. So it's important to remember that this savings here is assuming you want all of these servers to be running for 3 years. So it's important to review that and understand the numbers. You know, you could probably take 20 to 40% off this number if you're going to do 1-year reservations. Still valuable data, still helpful. You know, go look at the Azure calculator. We'll go poke at that again in a second to verify your numbers, but keep that in mind on that page. On this page, on this Azure Advisor section is also where it will tell you if it thinks you have VMs that are too big. It'll literally say, hey, this VM never uses more than 20% of its compute power. We recommend you drop it 2 sizes. There's really good data in there. It's really important to look at Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor will also tell you about reservations and cost savings plans on resources that are not VMs. So things like disks that aren't attached to something, so they're just sitting there unused, costing you money. They'll talk to you about savings plans, which we'll talk about in a second. They'll talk to you about maybe a reservation on a disk, a large disk, or a database, a Cosmos DB or an Azure SQL DB. There's reservations for resources in Azure that aren't just VMs, and they're beyond the scope of what I want to get to on this call. But if you have a larger Azure presence, it is important to evaluate the value of those reservations for non-virtual machine resources. They'll show you a lot of best practices and show you all kinds of interesting data, and all your recommendations are right there. There's information on the Microsoft Learn. If you haven't played with Microsoft Learn, there's a course called Getting Started with Azure Advisor. It'll walk you through all of the things in here. The course is 37 minutes long with 9 units. It's pretty quick and easy, but it kind of gives you a run book on how to do that. There is also the Azure Advisor will funnel you into it has security recommendations, but there's a lot more security recommendations in the Defender for Cloud portal when you enable that. That's a whole nother can of worms we're not going to get into today. Azure Advisor is free. I highly recommend it. The one thing it is missing that you will see, and this is actually missing in a couple of the private cost management tools, is it doesn't tell you about AHub, Azure Hybrid Use Benefit. It's kind of the biggest savings on your VM, and Microsoft doesn't advertise it this way. You need a partner or somebody understands it, or your own understanding to go in and understand where that applies. So keep in mind, this is not the only answer. There's sometimes more data points. And Azure Advisor also doesn't always help you kind of get to the bottom of where your costs are. We often see costs are ballooning because of subtle details, like maybe you're running Microsoft Sentinel and your log analytics is just kind of growing on you. You don't realize it. Or you got a lot of input and output. Somebody's restoring a bunch of data from archive storage, and that's costing you. So it doesn't always give you a complete story, but it's a useful tool. Great to go check up on it. I recommend if you're managing Azure, I'd be an Azure Advisor about once a month, just looking for recommendations to cover that. We talked earlier about the pricing calculator. Google Azure pricing calculator, click on the link. Here we are at a virtual machine. Now you can look at your pricing and your cost savings, right? We did this previously. This 8-core, 32 gig of RAM VM is $550 a month. We throw a reservation on there. It goes down to $434. We throw a hybrid use benefit on there. It's $165. We've saved $320 right there. 2 quick changes. Great way to understand your costs and your savings options. We didn't talk about savings plans. Now you'll notice that part of the reason is that the savings plans don't tend to offer as big a discount. A 1-year savings plan is 31% discount instead of a 41% discount. So we don't do them as often. Oftentimes when we get in there, like, let's get specific about the resources we want to cover. What's interesting about savings plans is that they are a way to commit to a certain dollar amount of compute spend with Azure. So that compute spend can actually apply outside of virtual machines. So you can go the route of doing an Azure savings plan and work through all the information there. And I'm pulling up my article here to walk you through the services that it does cover. So it is to cover compute, but that compute spend can apply to things like virtual machines, app services. I think they have to be of a certain level, like a premium V3 to get that. Azure Kubernetes service, functions premium plan, container instances. So it's really still focused at kind of IaaS level virtualized machine coverage. And what you're doing is you're committing to a certain amount of monthly spend on Azure compute. So it is an interesting way to go for a company that maybe doesn't want to deal with reservations yet. Maybe they have a lot of things they're bringing and coming and going on, and they're still figuring things out. We can go do a savings plan and activate some of those savings without having to dial in as closely what VMs and what resources they're tied to. So still a great option and something to be aware of. We talked about the cost management portal in the Microsoft portal, all kinds of great recommendations here. Azure Advisor is kind of a part of the cost management portal. The cost management portal also gives you additional details around other pricing, reporting around your cost management. Where's your spend going and why? That sort of thing. It is helpful. Again, you can Google what is Azure Microsoft Cost Management, and you'll find some tooling and some recommendations on that. The third thing we can offer in this space, maybe not the third, I'm losing track of my numbers here. Another thing we can offer as your trusted Microsoft partner is, in addition to just our native knowledge of Azure and understanding of how to do cost management, our ability to walk you through Azure Advisor, to add things like a hub that it doesn't recommend, look at the pricing calculator. There's a couple other ways you can manage this. One is we can help you with additional tool sets. There's a number of tools out there that give really good reporting. Some of them go much deeper than others. Some of them are more focused. A couple of the tools we've used in the past, we've used Calibrate. It gives you some really great reporting on cloud optimization and FinOps, financial operations, automation for really trying to free up a bunch of your cloud spend. We've often used Nerdio. Nerdio has some great cost savings tools, but more importantly and more commonly, it is a great AVD management platform. If you're trying to scale AVD, you're struggling with managing AVD at scale, maybe your help desk struggles to manage the backend Azure portal details tied to AVD, Nerdio is a great platform and we can help you get rolling on it. It'll help you manage those environments in a really scalable and automated way. Incredible tools it has built in for managing resources and scheduling downtime and turning VMs off and turning them back on, and all kinds of incredible features. Really great product. We also can give you access to Block 64 assessments. This is a tool that gives maybe less detailed cost management recommendations, but it's really great at high level recommendations across your environment. End of life servers, end of life resources, recommendations for best practices, security overview, holistic view of your Azure and your Microsoft environment with the security, cost, and best practices perspective. Great reporting. Maybe you need to provide reporting to a board or an investment company, and you really want some high-end reporting. Block 64 has some great options there, so we can absolutely help you with that. The final thing I want to talk about is just there are options when you're buying Azure about where you buy it from. So a lot of people just, click on Azure, add it to their tenant, throw a credit card number in there, and they're off to the races. And that's where a lot of customers are, and you're completely welcome to do that. Totally fine. You can buy your Microsoft licenses from one company, buy your Azure direct, vice versa. There's lots of options. Sourcepass MCOE is a CSP, a cloud solutions provider, and we can resell Azure. And so that's another option where sometimes access to some of this reporting and tools are things we'll help you with as we onboard you to kind of help you get that cost savings. And we can talk about what your options are there. We'll also happily do a Azure cost savings project for you a la carte if you want to just get that information. And as a CSP, oftentimes we have other options where we can help you with some of those cost issues through some other avenues that I don't want to dig into too deeply here, but it's worth the conversation with us. We can pull together a holistic approach to help you save a lot of money on Azure, which is exciting because budgets are hard to come by. And when you have an Azure subscription that starts to move up by 20, 30, 60%, that starts to eat into your opportunity to do other things. And so it's really important to stay on top of your Azure costs. And the other thing you can do is as you clean up your Azure costs, it allows you to open doors to other products. And so one of the other products I wanted to talk about, it's kind of similar and is beyond the scope of what we're going to go deep into today is Microsoft for Defender for Cloud. And Defender for Cloud is a solution that Microsoft has that's really powerful. And it really does some really cool things from a management perspective and allows you to kind of add that same level of reporting that we talked about with Azure Advisor, but from a security perspective. So Defender for Cloud is kind of a native, cloud native, Azure native security dashboard. And it can do a number of things. It can enable agents and reporting off of all your VMs and your resources, even resources that aren't running on a machine. Maybe it's an IaaS solution or as a platform as a service solution. You're running a website there. There's no virtual machine. They can still pull in security data into their dashboard. They've got AI-enabled analytics. They've got security posture management. They help you detect cyber attacks. Defender for Cloud will help you deploy Defender for Endpoint to the servers you are running and manage it. They can help manage your patches. Really gives you some great compliance reporting. It does support multiple clouds. So you can integrate your GitHub, your AWS, your GCP, even your on-prem servers can be integrated in Defender for Cloud to Arc and other agents. You're able to get their data in that place and get one dashboard on your security posture. So it's often a place I'll push people when we do save them a bunch of money. Hey, let's save you a bunch of money, let you realize that money, but let's take a small percentage of it and drive it into driving your security posture. As you can see, there's security posture monitoring, regulatory compliance. You can come in here and say, hey, I'm aiming for SOC 2. What are some of the changes I need to do to get my environment more aligned? Starts to talk about cyber attacks, pulls in data when it does detect an attack, workload protection. So it's covering more than your VMs. It covers all kinds of workloads from servers to storage to databases to containers, your key vault where you're storing your certifications, certificates and your sensitive secrets, app services, DNS, you name it. Does a lot of great vulnerability scanning. So you can do some of that scanning, looks at your DevOps security posture. So you're running Azure DevOps or GitHub, can give you some really good information. Looks at your infrastructure as code, really kind of gives you some feedback, and even can do some code security, evaluate your code for security. So a lot of capabilities in there. Probably should do a whole nother dive on that. But I just wanted to mention that because as we're in Azure Advisor, we're looking at cost management. This is kind of the third tier of that, of like cost management, really reporting on your cost. Advisor gives you a lot of recommendations at a high level of security and scalability and cost savings. And Defender gives you the deep security reporting. So lots of tools here, lots of opportunities to help you. Would love to help you. Just have a chat with you. Just hit up our team and we'll walk you through what we can do, help you understand where your status is, and give you some insights. Often we can save people 10 to 50% on their Azure bill within a couple months just by giving them some tips and helping them understand what's running up there. Sprawl is a common thing in IT. You've had 3 or 4 different people in IT over the last different couple of years that have come and gone, and they've all built different things and named things differently, and you don't always know what you have up there. That's a really common thing. I've got a lot of stuff. What is it? How's it working? Is it being used? Is it secure? Azure really makes it easy to answer those questions with a few changes and a little bit of insight. So reach out to us at the Sourcepass Center of Excellence for Microsoft. SourcePassMCOE.com is our website. Fill out the contact us form and say, hey, we want some help with optimizing our Azure. We'd love to jump on a call with you, take a look, give you some feedback, and tell you how we can help. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our content on LinkedIn and YouTube. Share, let people know what you find insightful. Leave comments. I'll love reading comments on LinkedIn and on YouTube, and even just some of the comments we're getting from customers. Thank you guys for watching. It really is encouraging to know you find the content valuable. And we look forward to talking to you on the next one. We've got some exciting topics coming up. We're going to be covering intra-global secure access. We're going to start talking about some conditional access and authentication methods like FIDO 2.0. And I got a whole stack. I was looking at the stack. I have so many topics. I need more time. I would love to do these more often. We're trying to get at least one a week, maybe a couple a week, but lots of great content to share with you. And I hope you continue to find it valuable. And I look forward to joining you on the next episode of the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.